Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Insight podcast. The Mind, Body, and Soul series celebrates the journeys and stories from health and wellness professionals who are committed to helping their clients and patients realize their physical, emotional, and spiritual courage and well-being. Our guest today is Dr. William Davis. Dr. Davis is a cardiologist, author, and health crusader. His 3 books include Wheat Belly, Lose Wheat, Lose Weight, and Find Your Path Back to Health. Now, the first edition was published back in 2014, and I remember that because there was a big bagel on the cover, and I have a bone to pick with Dr. Davis, but I digress. The revised edition and expanded edition was republished back in December 2019. His next book was Undoctored, Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. And his third and most recent book, published this past February, is Super Gut, a 4-week plan to reprogram your microbiome, restore health, and lose weight. Dr. Davis, it is a pleasure to have you on the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Insight podcast.
Hey, Howard. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, in the spirit of full disclosure, I have a lot of those. I am actually an appreciator of the work that Dr. Davis has been involved with. I own Wheat Belly, Undoctored, Super Gut. I'm a member of, and I know we'll talk about it, his inner circle. And as I have been exploring my own journey to maintain my health as I get a little bit older, Dr. Davis's work has just been an integral part of that journey. So again, having Dr. Davis here, I am truly grateful. So again, thank you. Dr. Davis, if you could, for our listeners, and I, first of all, I could imagine almost everybody that's going to be listening to this podcast will have in some way come across one of your blogs, your articles, one of your books. But if you could, for them, could you describe a little bit about your background and your years as a healthcare practitioner, especially as a cardiologist?
Sure. So I practiced cardiology for 25 years, the interventional sort of cardiology, that is putting in stents, aborting heart attacks, ballooning arteries, doing atherectomies, all these devices that were real exciting at one time this was all brand new. And to be honest, Howard, I think I was pretty good at it. But I also, I made some blunders. I made some things happen to me. One was I became a vegetarian. This is about 30 years ago. I heard a colleague, a primary care doctor named Dr. Dean Ornish, you may remember that name, who advocated a super low-fat vegetarian lifestyle. And he claims to have reversed heart disease doing so, and published a study in a small number of people. Got a lot of press. I heard him talk. I thought, I'm going to give this a try. I didn't really know much about nutrition back then, Howard. I was just in the cath lab doing those procedures. Well, my health became a disaster. I gained weight around my waist. I had high blood pressure. I became a type 2 diabetic with fasting blood sugars in the 160 range, well into the diabetic range. My triglycerides were 390, which is terrible. My HDL cholesterol dropped to 27, which is a high risk level. And I thought, I'm doing, and I was exercising, I was jogging, playing tennis, going for hikes. And here I am, a metabolic disaster. Well, I stopped that diet. I called Ornish, by the way. And we didn't have a nice conversation, but
I can imagine.
I stopped the program. All of it was undone, but it was an illustration to me many years ago, just how powerful the wrong diet can be in generating all kinds of health effects. Well, then here I am working in the cath lab, aborting heart attacks, opening arteries, and my mom dies of that disease. I had just moved to Milwaukee to set up some of the hospitals and the new technologies. And my mom in New Jersey, where I grew up, was found dead, sudden cardiac death, after her 2-vessel coronary angioplasty. So ironically, my mom dies of the disease I am trying to manage in a cath lab in a hospital. So once again, a vivid illustration, and to me, this was not very smart to try to manage a disease like coronary disease in a cath lab. So I asked back then, well, what could I have done with my mom to identify potential trouble 2 years, 5 years, 10 years before real trouble strikes? Because real trouble can be death. Well, the only device back then, this remains true today also, was a CT heart scan. And this is so long ago, Howard, it was actually an EBT heart scan, electron beam tomography device. But since it's been replaced by CT, something called multi-detector CT devices. But today, even today, you do the same thing. Get a CT heart scan. It gives you a coronary calcium score because calcium occupies 20% of the volume of atherosclerotic plaque. So it's an index, a dipstick for plaque in the heart's arteries that cause heart attack and other problems. Well, we're scanning people left and right. It was one of the first scanners in the Midwest. There were 2 in Chicago at the time, so 1 in Milwaukee. And we're scanning people, and of course, we're uncovering tons of silent heart disease in everyday people like you and me. People going to work, jogging, riding their bikes, going to school, everyday people. What do you do about it? A normal score is 0, no plaque, no calcium. And the higher it is, the closer you are to heart attack, needing stents, etc. So it wouldn't be uncommon, for instance, let's say a business guy comes in, he says, my dad had a heart attack age 58. I'm 52. I want to know if I'm in line for that too. So he gets a heart scan and scores, let's say 500. Well, if you do nothing, which of course you shouldn't do, but if you did nothing, the score increases on average 25% per year. So 500, 625, whatever 25% more is. Every step, you're closer to dying, heart attack, other catastrophe. So back then, this is 25 years ago now, so I'm going way back. We would put people on a baby aspirin and a high dose of a statin cholesterol drug, a low-fat diet, exercise program, and maybe some other things. And we help publish these data. What happens to that coronary calcium score? It goes up 25% per year. It does nothing. And that's been corroborated numerous times by other groups. And so what do you do when I got people freaking out on me, right? Understandably. Well, unfortunately, some of my colleagues who are unscrupulous would tell people, they would take advantage of them and say, well, hey, Howard, you're a walking time bomb. Let's put you through the real test, the heart catheterization, see if you need a preventive bypass or stent implantation, which is wrong. Yeah. There's no proof that does it. Take someone like you and me, no symptoms, going for walks, riding bikes, and putting you through procedures. There's no proof that that benefits you in some way, but it's done all the time, Howard. So I scrambled to try to find better solutions, and it led me down some unusual paths like vitamin D. When I added vitamin D, for instance, it was the first time. So we did all kinds of things, fish oil, changed that, and it slowed the progression. They'd be down to 12% per year or 8%, which I thought was, wow, great. When I added vitamin D, it was the first time I saw scores do that, drop dramatically. I didn't believe it at first. I pulled up the scans because I thought it was wrong. I thought somebody had got something wrong. No, you could see the calcium had shrunk. And while you can't see fine detail of the softer elements in atherosclerotic plaque, you can still see some of it. And it also shrunk. So we were shrinking coronary plaque. And another lesson we learned, one of the things I did reject is this idea that cholesterol is the major driver of coronary. I'm shocked that this is still around being talked about.
I remember when I turned into my 40s and I had that conversation with my own doctor, and because I was on cholesterol, high blood pressure, and I mean, part of the conversation is very familiar to me. I do have one question. You mentioned, those early years, and you're seeing this, these scores through doing the tests of the arteries. Had this kind of journey that these patients were taking towards this very bad potential occurrence of an event, had that been building year after year? Or because in some of your books you talk about the frankenwheat, the sugar, the wheat, and how we suddenly make food, it's all processed. Had the issues you were seeing were they just a part of just environment, or had they been exacerbated by the fact that our diet was also changing? We're working in the office, we're not exercising as much, things like that.
Well, so it was the rejection of this idea that cholesterol is a factor driving heart disease. I don't believe that's true. Howard, cholesterol was meant to be a crude, indirect marker for the things that cause heart disease when that research was done in the 1950s and 1960s. So cholesterol was meant to be an indirect marker for the lipoproteins, fat-carrying proteins in the bloodstream. Well, you know what? Today, in fact, for the last 25 years, I've been testing, you can actually look at the lipoproteins. You can look at their size, their structure. You can characterize. So that's what I did. And it became clear, and this is not just my experiences, there's good evidence to this effect from people like Dr. Ron Krause at University of California, Berkeley, Hopkins group, a Toronto group, a Texas group, over and over, that it's small LDL particles, not LDL cholesterol. You can use cholesterol to crudely guesstimate how many LDL particles you have, but let's actually measure the particles. Well, so people who have coronary disease, like a high score on a coronary calcium score, they virtually all have an excess of small LDL particles. It'd be something like 2,000 or 2,400 nanomoles per liter particle count per volume. And the science was clear back then. It remains true today. The only foods that cause small LDL particles are grains and sugars, period. Not fat, not saturated fat. So not butter. So I asked people, you know what? Hey, clearly statins don't work. A low-fat diet is nonsense. Let's just try this. No wheat, no grains, no sugar, because that's what causes small LDL to be provoked. So they do it. Small LDL, they come back a few months later. Small LDL is 0 or some other very low number, 150, whatever, but dramatic reduction, often obliteration of that abnormality. And blood pressure dropped. Then they lost weight. And many type 2 diabetics became non-diabetic. And people would say things like, you didn't tell me I'd lose 58 pounds. You didn't tell me that I'd have to stop my insulin and diabetes drugs. My blood sugar was so much better. And you didn't tell me that my joint pain from rheumatoid arthritis would gradually go away. So I did it for cardiac calcium scores, Howard, and small LDL particles. But I stumbled into something. And at first I said to myself, how in the world can this be? Every official agency dispensing dietary advice agrees. You must include healthy whole grains. Every dietitian says so. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, American Heart Association, American Diabetes, they all agree you must make whole grains a dominant player in your diet. And here it is, you take it out and magnificent things happen. You know, when you take a type 2 diabetic and make him or her non-diabetic, you have added something like 8 years to their life and spared them, more than likely, eye disease, kidney disease, heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, gastroparesis, all the stuff that happens in type 2 diabetics. So we're talking about dramatic changes to people's health, not to mention losing 40, 80, 130 pounds just by doing this. So it became clear there was something fundamentally and desperately wrong with the conventional notion of a healthy diet.
And is this how ultimately wheat belly came to fruition? Is, how do I take all this evidence that I'm seeing and doing my studies and working with my patients and making it, providing clinical advice to them? Is this how wheat belly came about?
Yeah, but it was prompted by getting mad.
Okay.
So I had a few for instance, I had a 38-year-old school teacher, nice lady, and she came to see me because of palpitations, a flip-flopping feeling, or recorded a rhythm. There was nothing. It was very benign. But she's always clutching her abdomen. Like I said, what's wrong? She says, well, remember, I have ulcerative colitis for 12 years, and I have pain 24 hours a day. I'm on 3 drugs for it, including a biologic. It costs her, I think, $2,000 a month just in the copay. And she's a school teacher. Her husband's a cop, right? It's not rich people. But she's clutching her abdomen. She says she also hemorrhages. She gets a transfusion every 2 or 3 months because she loses so much blood from her ulcerative colitis. And her gastroenterologist said, it's clear the medicines aren't working. Let's take your colon out. a colectomy. She's 38. They're going to take her colon out and then reroute her ileum to the surface to make an ileostomy bag. And, once you do that, you cannot go back. You're going to have this disfiguring thing hanging on you. You don't have a colon anymore. You have disrupted your health dramatically and you can't go back. I said to her, I know you're here just for palpitations, but let me tell you what I do with many other patients where I deal with diet. I said, have you thought about getting rid of wheat and grains? She said, no. They biopsied me twice for celiac disease and tested my blood for the markers. I don't have it. I get that. I'm not talking about celiac disease. I'm just talking about the disruptive effects of modern wheat and grains. So she lives, and I said, wait, what do you have to lose? They're going to take your colon out. Well, she comes back like 4 weeks later, big smile on her face. I said, Tim, what happened? She said, well, first of all, I lost 38 pounds and I didn't even try. I just lost 38 pounds. And then within 5 days, all the pain was gone. Diarrhea stopped. The bleeding stopped. I stopped one of the drugs after 2 weeks. After 4, I stopped the second drug. And then subsequently, she stopped the third drug. Well, so she's cured. She has no ulcerative colitis. She feels the best she has in years and years. She goes back, and this is what got me so angry, Howard. She goes back to the gastroenterologist, who I know, and says, hey, look at me. I am in perfect health. I don't have ulcerative colitis anymore. He says, how'd you do that? And she told him. And he says, oh, it's a coincidence. Go back to what you're doing.
Oh, my.
And Howard, I just thought, when faced with that kind of revelation, at least say, well, maybe I'm missing something here. Let me think about that. That sounds kind of wacky. But no, doesn't matter. Go back to what you were doing. And I had a series of cases like that where I got so hopping mad. People who, another call from a doc. I had this nice woman, type 2 diabetic, hemoglobin A1C, that long-term measure of blood sugar of about 12.7%, which is terrible, which means she can be kidney failure, heart disease, peripheral vascular in short order. And she's on insulin and several drugs, like 4 drugs just for blood sugar, not even counting the blood pressure medications and other things. So I tell her how I do things. Well, she loses, I think, like 43 pounds. I get her off all the diabetes drugs. Hemoglobin A1C is 5.6%. It's not perfect yet, but a hell of a lot better than 12.7%. Her doctor calls, he says, who the hell do you think you are, taking my patient off all her diabetes medications? I said, well, did you see her hemoglobin A1C? It's better off the drugs. He hung up on me. So,
and why?
In other words, what's going through their head is this does not compute. They're better off the drugs.
This has gone beyond helping the patient. It's almost as though, and I don't want it to come across like I'm parroting things that I know I've heard you say, but doctors not listening to patients or not being willing to go and do research and learn more and being quick to go to the procedure route or the drug route. That's, in my mind, that's wrong. But it sounds like that was a pretty frequent occurrence.
Standard operating procedure virtually everywhere. Not to say there aren't functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, and chiropractors, and an occasional mainstream MD who does get it. But mainstream doctors don't get it. And even worse, Howard, don't care to get it. And that's what bothers me the most, is kind of willful ignorance. So if you're an ophthalmologist and you get thousands and thousands of dollars every day by injecting these drugs into people's eyes to stop macular degeneration, would you stop and say, you know what, maybe I should spend more time educating people to show them how to prevent this? No, because there's too much money at stake. Same thing with coronary disease, so many other diabetes. Diabetes is easy to reverse, Howard. It's so easy. And yet most people are told, once you're a diabetic, type 2 diabetic, you're always going to be a diabetic. Never get off which is completely, it's not just my opinion, by the way. There is published evidence to this effect, but it's simply not. That's why I say it's not just ignorance. It's also often they don't care.
How did Wheat Belly then, before I even ask this question, I grew up in Detroit and we had the most phenomenal bagels, perhaps next to New York, giving up, and I poured out the dough in my bagel, but I'm thinking you're saying that's not good enough, Howard. because, a nice crispy bagel with lox and cream cheese and some tomato and capers, that's a hard thing to give up. So how do people give up this thing that they like the most, bread, pasta, the bagel, and begin to change this mindset of, okay, I need to find some other alternatives.
Well, I think it starts with educating people about what modern wheat, that is the product of what's called high yield semi-dwarf wheat. It's 18-inch tall, thick stalked, large seed head plant, essentially created in a laboratory. So if you tell people what this thing does to you, it starts to make sense. So one of the effects is there's a protein in wheat called gliadin, and your body can't break it down, of course. So if you ate an egg, you break the uh, proteins down to single amino acids. If you eat the gliadin protein of wheat, you break it down to 4 or 5 amino acid long fragments or peptides. Those peptides have opioid properties, and they bind to opioid receptors in your brain, and they stimulate appetites. It's a potent appetite stimulant and addictive factor. So that's why nice guy like Howard Fox says, I got to have the damn bagels. I got to have it. And in fact, after not having wheat for a few hours, many people start to get shaky and desperate. So there's that. The heart disease angle, the amylopectin A carbohydrate of wheat not only raises blood sugar extravagantly, more so than table sugar, it also provokes formation of small LDL particles. Small LDL particles, Howard, are perfectly crafted to create heart disease, coronary disease, because when they're able to get into the wall of an artery, they're more adherent, they're more oxidation prone, they are more likely to incite inflammation in the wall of the artery, and they last 5 to 7 days in your bloodstream as compared to the 24 hours of a normal large LDL particle. So that's the amylopectin A. There's wheat germ agglutinin that is a very potent bowel toxin. And there's some other factors in phytates. Phytates are the factors in wheat and grains that bind all minerals: calcium, magnesium, manganese, iron, and zinc, and you poop it out. And that's why mineral deficiencies are so. In other words, you were told that you must have grains for their B vitamins and fiber, not being told that you can have very severe mineral deficiencies, which have implications. Magnesium, lack of magnesium causes heart rhythm disorders, higher blood pressure, higher blood sugar, osteoporosis, fractures. Lack of zinc impairs your immune system, disrupt your skin health. Iron, I've seen many ladies, in particular, this afflicts ladies more than guys, with iron deficiency anemia, with hemoglobin. Normal hemoglobin level is about 12, 13, or 14. These ladies walk around with 7 or 8. They're breathless, they're cold, they're tired, they're getting iron injections, oral iron, and then also blood transfusions. They go off wheat, and their hemoglobin is normal within 2 weeks. So these are profound effects from the components of this thing created by geneticists or scientists.
It's amazing. And I would imagine just going on this journey, having someone, it's not me as a coach, but someone who's used to working with individuals, patients on lifestyle choice, and perhaps coming up with new behaviors that stick. But it's hard. I mean, again, giving up that bagel, that's hard. And if you can't see below the camera here, but I probably could use a little more of give up that one occasional bagel. How did then Wheat Belly kind of transform? Because Wheat Belly was literally on my shelf. I picked it up a couple times. I looked at it, but it really was not until the second book, Undoctored, came out. And then the inner circle, and then really just listening to the topics of, and for me, it was making my own yogurt. Okay. And I've been doing that, the three bacteria style yogurt, super yogurts, and really beginning to see things change. And so how did this Undoctored and this community begin to take shape? Because I think that's been an important part of this education, and really people beginning to learn more about your work and the idea around elimination of grain, And then starting this conversation, I know we're going to eventually get into, is the gut biome and the importance of the gut. So talk to us a little bit about the Undoctored and this inner circle that came about.
Sure. By the way, Undoctored is like my 8th book or so, something like that.
I know you've got a lot of you've got an entire Wheat Belly series.
Well, I like those stories I told you, where people would come to me and they say things like this. I'd like to do the Wheat Belly lifestyle, and I show them how to do it. They go to their primary care doctor or somebody else, and the doctor says, better not do it. It's going to give you a heart attack. I'll give you a Lipitor if you're going to do that dopey diet. So they didn't take the Lipitor, of course, but they'd come back and they'd be, 60 pounds lighter. Their blood sugar's better. It's all that kind of great stuff happens. And so what I saw was over and over and over again, Howard, people succeeded in magnificent ways despite the doctor. And were doing it on their own, largely. That is, they weren't doing it in a hospital, weren't doing it in a clinic, and they were having a level of health that was dramatically superior. The doctor does not dispense health. They dispense pharmaceuticals and procedures to try to address one disease, but they don't actually give you health. In fact, you'll find most doctors are painfully ignorant of issues in health, like diet, vitamin D, microbiome.
It almost seems as though they're focused on an effect, not a cause, in a way.
Exactly. So if you were to treat type 2 diabetes the conventional way, your fasting glucose is real high, your hemoglobin A1C is high. So we give you insulin and other drugs to push blood glucose down. That does not protect you from kidney disease, blindness, amputations, and all the other problems of a diabetic. But what if we did instead? Not just push the blood sugar down. What if we addressed the factors that allowed high blood sugar and insulin resistance? That's what drives the high blood sugar. What if we address the factors that allow those situations to develop? Well, the diabetes more often than not goes away. Blood pressure is normalized. Psoriasis goes away. In other words, regardless of the label, when you address the root causes, those conditions just tend to just go away. And that's what happened to me. That's what I've done now, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of times. And that's why people, as you know, on this program, are slender, vigorous, look and feel younger than their chronological age. I truly mean this, Howard. Their health is superior to what they would have obtained through a doctor's office.
If that is the case, how then do I find the right kind of doctor? What are the questions I need to ask, and where do I look for a doctor that is going to be open to this? And I hate to use the term alternative medicine. To me, that does not do it justice. I'm sure you've got a better word for it, but how do I begin to take control as a patient, find a health practitioner, whether it be a doctor, nurse, etc., chiropractor, and begin to have that question of, this is what I am concerned with. And how can I do it without going through these invasive procedures and taking these lifelong drugs? How do I have that?
Well, first of all, I tell your listeners that without a doctor, you can accomplish spectacular things in health. You can do all kinds of things in health without the doctor. But, there's a time and place. Sometimes you do need their help. The best places to go are functional medicine practitioners. These are people who use nutrition and nutrients and the microbiome strategies before they resort to drugs and procedures. Integrative health practitioners, naturopaths, which differs from state to state because of the legislative restraint. But they're pretty good. Chiropractors, it really helps identify just one, regardless of their degree or specialty. Because what happens is, let's say you find a functional medicine doc who you like, and then you say, hey, I've got a problem. I'd like to see a urologist or a gynecologist. Do you have somebody you trust? See, when you identify just one practitioner that you like, you often tap into their network, and they'll know, oh, yeah, Dr. Smith on the other side of town. He's a great gynecologist. He uses natural methods. He uses bioidentical hormones. So that's the kind of thing you have to do, is just identify. The problem with this also is all these online rating systems for docs are gamed by the healthcare systems. So like there's a healthcare system in my town that when these, like annual best doctors in town kind of thing comes up, they have all the nurses and staff vote for their own doctors. Yeah. So you can't trust those. You know what still works the best, I think, Howard? Word of mouth.
Right.
It seems so old fashioned quaint, but that still is the best way.
I have to share this little story. And I think my journey into this new lifestyle began probably 2017, 2018. I don't know about you, but living in Chicago, we had a fairly decent fall. You're up in Milwaukee, fall is colors, there's cider mills, there's caramel apples. And you go into the local grocery store and they have the 3-pack of caramel apples with nuts on it. And I literally, during the fall, would overdose on caramel apples. And I remember, I see you cringing. For our listeners, I just made Dr. Davis cringe about that. I remember waking up one day and I really felt odd. I mean, very odd. And I had bought the device that you had recommended to test the blood sugar.
Mhm.
And I had it. And of course I buy it, never used it. All right. But I went out, got my little pins and my testing apparatus. And my score was probably up near where yours was, 160. And I was scared literally to death. And it's like, what do I do? What's going on here? What do I do? And so I think, and that's where I began this journey of how can I take care of myself better? Who are the practitioners that I should be looking at? Because if I went to the doctor at the time, it's, let's amp up your dose of
Metformin.
medicine. So I get it. I get it. What I love about the community, though, it's individuals from all walks of life, and you're deeply involved actively in the conversation of helping each other. And you have the Undoctored coaches and now the Infinite Health Inner Circle, the coaches, but everybody's helping each other. And I think that's wonderful. And for our listeners, we're going to provide you the links to Dr. Davis's website. There's also a link back to to his Inner Circle if you want to learn more about it. Let's finally get to your newest book, of one of many books, but the newest one, Super Gut, because this idea of making my own yogurt a year ago was something I thought I need to do this because I love yogurt, but I needed to work. And I started to read and hear what you were saying, what the members were saying. And I began to craft my own yogurt. How did this interest in the gut biome, how did that begin to take shape, and why? And it's because today I can't go anywhere without hearing about my gut biome, healthy gut. But you seem to be on the early stages of really exploring and saying, wait a minute, folks, there's something here. So how did that begin to take shape for you?
Well, so people doing the basic wheat belly and undoctored programs did enjoy magnificent results, but some people didn't go all the way 100% back to perfect health. So a very common experience would be, well, I started the program and I was intolerant to numerous foods. Like I can't eat legumes or nightshades like eggplant or tomatoes, or I can't eat histamine containing foods like cheese without getting sick, or I have to avoid FODMAPs, fibers and sugars. And so those abnormalities persisted, even though those basic programs included advice to take a high potency multi-species probiotic, fermented foods, and prebiotic fibers to nourish microbes. So even though we were doing that, people were still encountering some obstacle. Another common one was I lost 78 pounds, but I have 30 more to go and I'm stuck. It just stopped. I plateaued. Or my blood sugar is dramatically better. My hemoglobin A1C dropped from 12% down to 5.7%, but it's not perfect, which is 5.0% or less. So people had great results, but not always 100%. So I asked, why? What is blocking their success? So I looked in the microbiome, Howard, there are tons of things that emerge from insights into the microbiome. One of them is that and you've likely heard this, that modern people have lost hundreds of healthy species that played important roles in human health, and we've lost them. And in their place, microbes keep each other in line. And when you lose healthy microbes, some of the unhealthy microbes, many of them stool species, proliferate, like E. coli, Klebsiella, Citrobacter, Pseudomonas. They proliferated. And then in a shocking number of people, they ascended up into the small bowel, into the ileum, jejunum, duodenum, and stomach. And so 30 feet, trillions of microbes, and even more so. So 30 feet, trillions of microbes. Microbes only live for minutes to hours. They don't live very long. And so there's rapid turnover of these trillions of microbes. When they die, some of their debris enters the bloodstream. Many of us suspected this for many years, but it finally got validated, proven, corroborated in 2007 by a European group. And this process is called endotoxemia. That is, the endotoxin of bacteria gets into the bloodstream. And it's now clear why disruption of the intestinal microbiome can be experienced as depression or anxiety or Alzheimer's dementia in the brain, or as rosacea or psoriasis in the skin, or as the muscle and bone aches of fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, or restless leg syndrome. In other words, we're going to have to reassess, reconsider virtually all human disease in light of this new finding. Because you can imagine, if I give you a drug to block a pain pathway in fibromyalgia, but do nothing about the 30 feet of microbes, you're going to have all kinds of, you may reduce some of the pain from that anti-inflammatory drug you're taking, but you didn't address the cause. And that cause is going to make you gain weight, push you closer to type 2 diabetes, colon cancer, depression, anxiety, skin rashes, autoimmune diseases. So foolhardy to not look for it. The thing that really convinced me, though, Howard, this was a very common problem, was this: the AIRE device.
Sure.
AIRE, for your listeners, made by a company called Food Marble. You don't have to buy the device, but when the device first came out, the inventor, Dr. Angus Short in Dublin, Ireland, thought it was a device. He invented it for his wife because she had irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and was told to follow a low FODMAPs diet, low fiber, low sugar diet, because when you do that with IBS, you get a little less bloating and diarrhea. But he saw how tough it was for her, and so he invented this device that measures hydrogen gas if she had inadvertently got exposed to one of those fibers or sugars. Well, he releases it in 2018 or 19, something like that. I get a hold of it. I call him up. Angus, do you understand what you invented? He says, no, I thought it's just IBS, right? I said, no. This is a mapping device. It tells you where microbes are in your GI tract. And so you can use it to map out where bacteria are. And it's very effective. This is the old one, by the way. The new one is black. It's in my kitchen. And it measures now not just hydrogen gas, but also methane gas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, but when I started talking about it, and as you know, in the former Undoctored inner circle, now the Dr. Davis Infinite Health inner circle, tons of people testing it. And as you saw, like in our virtual meetups where we talk like this, Zoom. So every Wednesday night, as you recall, we have 70 to 100 people, and we're all talking, including about this. And it was shocking how many people tested positive. It's the rare person, it's the exception who tests negative. Now, critics might say, well, maybe the test is flawed. Maybe the device is flawed, except that people would test high. They do something about it and reduce the abnormal. It's a 0 to 10 scale, 0 perfect, 10 terrible. And they go from a 10, say, down to a 1.2. And they say, and finally, my arthritis pain is gone. Finally, I broke my weight loss plateau. That persistent rash kept me coming, is finally gone. My depression and anxiety have finally lifted. In other words, we saw the health improve even further. I now can eat nightshades and histamine-containing foods and legumes and fruit. I don't have any of those food intolerances anymore. So I saw all these problems lift by managing the microbiome.
And when I manage the microbiome, or we, the collective, are we What types of food are we consuming? And again, I've mentioned the yogurt because I do want you to chat about that because I love the yogurt. I mean, every Sunday night, that's what I make, my yogurt. But I have this device. It's providing me the H2 gas scores and now the methane scores. If it's a certain number above this threshold, I know I need to increase, add in. Is it the yogurt, the probiotic yogurt? Is it the fermented foods? What am I adding to help me then move that score a little bit lower?
Well, there's several choices. And sadly, if you go to your doctor, even a gastroenterologist, and say, hey, I'm testing positive for SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, 30 feet of microbes, etc. The doctor often says, you don't have that. Did you consult Dr. Google again, Howard? Or don't waste my time, or shock, there's no such thing. There are thousands of research studies documenting this. One of the problems we have, of course, is mainstream doctors are about 17, 18, 19, 20 years behind the science. And so, or if that doctor happens to be a little better informed, they hand you a prescription typically for a drug called rifaximin or Xifaxan. It's an antibiotic. 50% efficacy. No mention of how you got it, how to increase the efficacy, how to prevent recurrences, which are common. There was a time we were using herbal antibiotics. I was very skeptical, but there's some evidence to show that they work. There's two regimens we were using, the candibactin regimen and the FC-cytodispyoside regimen. But I asked a different question, so I was unhappy with that. If you if you have SIBO, 30 feet of microbes, and maybe it's manifesting as fibromyalgia or irritable bowel syndrome or restless leg syndrome or food intolerance or inability to lose weight or persistently high blood sugar, all those things. If you took a probiotic for SIBO, will it go away? No, it will persist. You might have a little less bloating or diarrhea, but you'll still have this SIBO. And so I asked questions like this. Well, what if we chose microbial species and strains that take up residence in the small bowel? That's where SIBO occurs. And what if we chose species and strains that produce what are called bacteriocins? These are natural antibiotics produced by some microbes effective against the species of SIBO. So I came up with that 3 species yogurt. I call it SIBO yogurt.
Yes.
It's got Lactobacillus gasseri, which colonizes the upper GI tract and produces up to 7 bacteriocins. So it's a bacteriocin powerhouse. My favorite microbe in the world, Lactobacillus rhodori, also a colonizer of the upper GI tract, produces up to 4 bacteriocins, including a very powerful one called reuterin. I was talking to a microbiologist, and he told me this a few months ago. He said, you know what? We sometimes use L. rhodori, Lactobacillus rhodori, to clean our vats, the vats where they grow microbes. I said, what? Really? He said, yeah. That's how effective it is in killing off pathogens. So I said, really? So I called a microbiologist friend of mine out in San Diego, Dr. Raul Cano, 40 years academic microbiology. And I said, hey, Raul, my friend Suresh says he uses rhodori to clean his vats. Does that sound right to you? He says, oh, yeah. We use Lactobacillus rhodori to clean our vats. That's how effective it is. So the yogurt has Lactobacillus gasseri, Lactobacillus rhodori. I added also Bacillus coagulans because of some evidence that it's very good for reducing IBS symptoms, and it does produce 1 bacteria. So we co-ferment those 3, and we use a method of fermentation, as you know now, prolonged fermentation, because we want hundreds of billions of bacteria for a big effect. Consume a half cup a day. It's very tasty with some blueberries and whatever, squirt of stevia.
Oh, yeah.
And so far, now this is preliminary, but so far about 30 people have tried this and 90% normalized their hydrogen gas on their breath. So we'll likely do a clinical trial down the road, not with yogurt though, because it's too hard to control the numbers. That will probably encapsulate it as a probiotic and then test this formally. But so far, Howard, people, and you know what? If I'm telling you to have your colon removed or get a frontal lobotomy, we better be damn sure that's necessary. But when you're talking about the potential treatment being a yogurt, you don't have to have absolute confidence to do that because it's just stinking yogurt. And it's delicious. And as you point, it's fun to make.
I love it. I love it. Actually, one self-serving question here, Dr. Davis. Is there a limit to how long I should be consuming this yogurt? Because literally, I make it every Sunday, 7 p.m. because that gives me my full 36 hours. Is there, or should I be, breaking it up every once in a while? Just do reuteri, or gastri, or try another strain of bacteria.
See, all those three guys, the Gasseri, the Rotari, and the Bacillus coagulans, are normal inhabitants of your GI tract. So I don't believe we could argue there's any harm in doing it, but there's also no harm. There's benefit to variety.
Okay.
One of the problems we have, Howard, in the world of the microbiome is we don't have knowledge of the full community of bacteria that's necessary. In other words, so bacteria like humans. So you and I have friends, relatives, family, community, bacteria the very same way. In fact, the microbiologist friend of mine, Dr. Raul Keno, is one of the pioneers in that. He's worked on developing what he calls guilds or consortia of bacteria. And so, by the way, he and Martha Carlin started a little company called BiotiQuest, and they're the ones who developed the Sugar Shift product. They call it
Okay.
Sugar Shift because it reduces blood sugar,
Right.
like about 10 milligrams in non-diabetics, as well as diabetics. But that product, Sugar Shift, is a consortium of bacteria that collaborate with each other, and you get bigger effects, including a drop in blood sugar, because these microbes working together consume the fructose, sucrose, and glucose in your GI tract, and thereby reduce your blood sugar. So when you're replacing Rotari, Gasseri, and Bacillus coagulans, they're probably very important keystone species that you're supposed to have anyway. So I don't think there's any harm in doing this for a long. You don't have to do it for a long time, but I don't think there's any harm to it.
Okay. But I can bring in some other species and just to add some variety. The in the spirit of time, by the way, we are like well over 3/4 of an hour. So I'm having fun. If you're having fun, let's keep going. We're educating besides having fun. This whole idea around fermenting now, there's the woman, Donna Schwenk was on your show, and I have been interested in fermenting for a little while, especially around water kefir. And so it was like perfect timing for me. How is the introduction of fermentation and eating more fermented foods? How does that also contribute to, the body rebalancing itself to be able to, you know, build up the healthy gut biome and to address some of the, the effects of, not being as healthy as we could? How is fermenting that,
I'm glad you brought that up, Howard, because it's so important. That is, with the availability of home refrigeration in 1927 by the Frigidaire company, when they discovered the use of Freon as refrigerant, Americans forgot or stopped eating fermented foods, which are ubiquitous. They're everywhere previously. Well, we stopped. And that's part of the reason why we've disrupted our microbiomes so severely. So bringing them back is a big part of the solution. As you point, so the yogurts, kefirs, kombuchas, fermented veggies, this should be easy and virtually cost-free because you can just ferment veggies on your kitchen counter. I got a whole bunch of stuff fermenting on my kitchen counter. Now, why does this work? The best evidence comes from Stanford, a husband-wife microbiologist group, Erica and Justin Sonnenberg, and they just published very good evidence about not even 6 months ago. And they just examined what happens to the microbiome when you frequently consume fermented foods. And they showed that, so the microbes in fermented foods are typically species like Leuconostoc mesenteroides, or Pediococcus pendiceus, Pediococcus acidilacticide. But those aren't the ones that take up residence. They take up temporary residence. But on some uncertain mechanism, their presence, their restoration, allows other healthy species to emerge. It's not quite clear why. Are they latent? Are you more receptive to the environment? No, nobody knows. But something happens where there's great diversity of healthy species just by getting those handful of microbes from the fermented foods. So it's looking as if fermented foods are among the most important things you can do for your microbiome.
I I'm very very much looking forward to seeing the effects of the fermenting. And my first batch of water kefir was with cranberry juice, and it hasn't blown up in my kitchen yet. I think I'm good. Uh, just for folks out there, if you're going to make water kefir and a second ferment, always make sure you burp the bottle, okay? Frequently, or else you've been warned. Dr.
Have you
David,
tried this Saccharomyces boulardii cider or other juices yet, Howard?
I'm just getting started, so
Okay.
I will try that. Can I find that on the Inner Circle?
That is on the Inner Circle, and there's one version in my blog, the
Okay,
drdavisinfinitehealth.com blog. And I'll tell you, listeners, real quick, this is so fun. It's not in the Super Gut book. There's a ton of stuff in the Super Gut book, of
right.
course. This one's not in the Super Gut book. This is in the website and blog. But it's taking a fungus called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a cousin of Saccharomyces cerevisiae. That's the stuff used to make wine and beer. But
Okay,
boulardii is adapted to the human body, and it has all kinds of great effects. It's kind of a traffic cop for bacteria. It really cultivates the good guys, suppresses the bad guys. And if you take it, by the way, this juice during a course of antibiotics, if you must take an antibiotic, it minimizes the damage to your microbiome. So it's the most powerful thing you can do through a course of antibiotics. So it's available commercially as a product called Flora Store, Florastor. It's like, I don't know, $17 at Walgreens or Target or Meijer. Take a capsule, empty it into any volume of juice. Quart, let's say, of apple cider. Apple cider is very easy. I've done it in coconut pineapple juice. I've done it in mango passion fruit juice. Just got to be sure there's no preservatives
right.
like potassium sorbate or something like that. So just plain juice. And by the way, cider is better than apple juice. You want the cloudy stuff. So empty capsule of Flora Store. Cap it lightly. As you point out, this one will produce huge quantities of gas. Leave it on your counter. You'll see it 24 hours. It's bubbling like a cauldron. That's how effectively it's fermenting. And then after 48 hours or so, put it in the refrigerator to stop fermentation. Because if you keep it going, it'll turn to hard cider that is alcohol. So stop it at 40 hours. And then what we do is sip maybe a quarter cup 2 or 3 times a day. And it helps rebuild your microbiome. It pushes back fungal species, all kinds of great stuff. And it tastes like apple soda or berry soda. It's delicious. It's sparkling. It's effervescent.
I will have to try it out, and I will comment on the blog. And the one beverage we hadn't chatted about, and I think if memory serves me, it deals more with the life the SIFO, the fungal, but it's the green tea and the
Clove.
yes, yes, and the what's the herb that not the
Eugenol.
no, what's the Halloween spice? Just God, it's just gonna hurt me. I can't remember.
Cinnamon, nutmeg.
It's the next, not cinnamon, not nutmeg. I'll get it. I'll get it.
Okay.
I'm just getting excited talking about food now. But you didn't. This is the other part of my life. I love food. I love my coffee. By the way, we're not going to chat about coffee because I do not want to be told by anybody that I have to give up my coffee.
Not for me.
All right, that's good. I have coffee and a sunrise every morning. I love that.
I've had 4.
Excellent, excellent. Doctor, before we head out today, and I do want to get, we'll give our listeners access information to the website, et cetera. As you look back on your career, and I know you've got a lot of years ahead of you, but as you look back on your career, is there anything that you would tell your younger self about choices you made or changes or things that you should get involved with or do, way back when, perhaps maybe in your youth or thinking about going into medical school, anything that you would share with your younger self?
Maybe that be patient because you'll get it right eventually. Because I went down a lot of dead ends, Howard. I grew up as a really poor kid in New Jersey. My mom was, before she died, of course, lived on which she was on welfare, single mom, two sisters, a one-bedroom house. So we were dirt poor. And so I put myself through 17 years of college and training with almost no help. Uh, Finished with a lot of debt, by the way, but paid it off promptly by working 100 hours a week, moonlighting and paying it off. And so I was pretty proud of what I did, the sacrifices, the work I did to get there, only to find out it's a corrupt system. It's a system based on wrong ideas and more on money than anything else. And that really bothered. And so, uh, on the other hand, I wouldn't know what I know now unless I went through 17 years education, training, and 25 years of practice. I wouldn't know a lot of these things. So I think just to have known I'd get it right eventually, though it took a lot of mistakes, like making myself diabetic, Howard. Like practicing interventional cardiology, only to realize this is not right. And so a lot of mistakes, but I think I'm close to getting it right now.
That's good. That's good. When you are walking down the street and you're in a suburb of Milwaukee, and you're walking down the local main street, maybe there's a nice coffee shop or somewhere. Do people stop you on the street and say, Dr. Davis, I have to share this with you? Do you ever get, what do they say?
They say, and I'll toot my own horn. Howard. They'll say,
Okay.
you changed my life. I thought I was tired. I was on 7 medications. I was depressed. I was anxious, skin rashes, hair falling out, a joint pain. Oh, and they say, now I don't take any medication. I feel better than I have in 30 years. So that's a very common experience. I'm not exaggerating. I don't have to exaggerate. And I can tell you, Howard, ain't my good looks and charisma that gets this message through to people. It's, I think, because these ideas work. I was a type 2 diabetic, for God's sake, and a person, as you see in the inner circle, is filled with people who say, yeah, my health is completely different than it used to be. But, you accomplish this largely on your own at minor expense compared to what it costs to engage in the healthcare system. But sadly, my colleagues don't care to hear this. It's like the tobacco industry. Does tobacco the big tobacco? Do they really want to know about lung cancer and heart disease? Not really. They have a business to run. So healthcare is a business, and so sad to say, if you want a real message, real insight into health, the last person to talk to is the doctor.
And I appreciate that, but I'm left with a question. Do you see change or any type of change happening for the better?
Things are changing faster because of the internet and more rapid information exchange, but it's still slow. I suspect after you and I are gone, maybe some change will start to. It's more of a generational thing. The current crop of doctors has to pass on or has to retire, and younger ones take over. But the problem also is the education system is flawed. There's a little bit of nutrition and microbiome, but it's still largely about drugs, diseases, diagnostics, and procedures. So the focus is wrong. I see more and more people on the bright side going to naturopathy, chiropractors, health coaches, physician's assistants. And there's these people, interestingly, seem to be more open-minded and more holistic. And so I think things will change, but Howard's going to take decades.
Okay. Okay. By the way, clove. That's what I was trying to think of. Clove, green tea.
Oh, yes.
That's another one of my favorite, drinks during the day.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Great. Very effective, right? Very soothing to the GI tract.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Rebuilds mucus.
I could be your poster child. By the way, I don't, just so you know, my hair is actually starting to grow back on the top of my head. I don't
Oh,
know.
interesting. Interesting. You having erotic dreams?
Uh, well, we're not going to talk about those yet. Listen,
A
Doc,
lot of people do.
you
With the
know,
Rotarite yogurt.
if it helps with my social life, I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Well, a lot of people experience. Let's talk about that for a moment. So, Rotarite by itself, you can use it as a component of that SIBO yogurt, but a lot of us, as you point out, just do the Rotarite yogurt alone. The ladies just love it because one of the things they get is an explosion of dermal collagen, and they thereby lose their wrinkles starting at about 8 weeks. But you and I also get deeper sleep. So I'm a chronic insomniac, and now I sleep 9 hours straight through, vivid dreams.
Yeah.
It rebuilds lost muscle and strength. In some people, not real consistent. I'm afraid you're getting it, but some people have hair regrowth or thicker hair. Grows faster also, as do your toenails and fingernails. Bone density is preserved, very effective for ladies in particular. It suppresses appetite, the so-called anorexigenic effect, and it also boosts libido. Testosterone is raised also. And many people report having a greater erotic content of their dreams like they had when they were 19 years old.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to have to start to log my dreams now. And, if I suddenly get engaged or married, I'm inviting you to the wedding. So thank you for that. Dr. Davis, before we head out, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, now we're going to provide links back to the books, but to learn more about you, your work, your blog, you've got a podcast, etc. Where are the best places for them to go?
Well, the Super Gut book, of course, it just came out a couple of months ago. That's a good place.
Mhm.
I have a Wheat Belly revised and expanded edition, as you pointed out early. It came out 2019. It contains like the basic starting programs we all follow. There's also my newer website. I transitioned everything from old websites to this one new kind of umbrella site. It's called drdavisinfinitehealth.com. And my blog is there. There's also the membership website, the so-called Inner Circle, where we have this kind of a interaction once a week. Typically, I bring on guests like Donna Schwank and some docs and things like that, and they bring in some new ideas. And then my podcast is the Defiant Health podcast. You can get on any podcast directory.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to provide all the links in our show notes, Dr. Davis Infinite Health, the links back to the books. And I know you're also active on social media, the social sites links as well, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and you're everywhere. And that's a good thing, because I think the message that you are bringing and what you're sharing through your work, your body of work, I know it's making a difference in my life. And I know as a coach, as a doctor, we all want to make a difference in the people whose lives, we cross, and we want to help people. And again, I want to thank you for the work that you've done, because you've been a big help for me. And I know our listeners are on the Mind, Body, and Soul series are going to appreciate this as well.
Nice to hear, Howard. Thank you.
Very good. Well, listen, stay on the line for just a second. We're going to do a short close, and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks, what a pleasure. And believe it or not, we are well over the 1 hour mark. And so I usually give my guests 30 minutes, but 30, 45, that's a long podcast. But, Dr. Davis and just what he has shared with us today, and it's just pure gold. And I want to really, really encourage you, listen to this episode, or make a beeline to his website, drdavisinfinitehealth.com. You can check out the books, his blog, his podcast. And really, if you are inclined, do check out the Infinite Health Inner Circle. This is such a great community, because if I have a question, maybe if you're like me, you watch YouTube videos. Okay. I've been consuming kefir water YouTube videos all weekend just to make sure I knew how to make kefir water, but everybody's has a piece of information. And unfortunately, a lot of people have opinions, and those opinions are not always based on facts. And so we really have to be cognizant of where we are consuming information. And I have found the inner circle here with that Dr. Davis has started to be a wonderful place to learn more about things that I can do to promote my good health. And I would certainly encourage you to not only visit the website, but do go out to the Dr. Davis Infinite Health Inner Circle and see if the membership is right for you. Okay. If you did enjoy this episode, again, do check out the website, all the social sites that we're going to share in our backlinks. If you enjoyed our podcast, Success Insight and the Mind, Body, and Soul series, you can find us on successinsightpodcast.com. We also have our LinkedIn and our Facebook pages, Success Insight Podcast, and we're also on all of the podcasting platforms. Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Audible, Spotify, etc. We want to know that you enjoyed today's episode, or if you have any comments about the episode, we want to hear from you. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on a future episode of the Mind, Body, and Soul series on the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.